What I really enjoy about flying is the absolute peace and quiet. You can be busy on the radio, but the rest of your life just disappears. I started flying about 18 years ago. As a child, I had no real exposure to aviation. This is something that happened later in life and linked to medicine, really. I'd flown with AMS, which is the Emergency Medical Services. I got a taste of flying, and particularly helicopter flying, going out to accident scenes, landing on a road. Difficult not to be captivated by how cool helicopters are. One of the reasons that I started my private pilot's license, whenever I did these transatlantic or intercontinental flights for Leatt while we were building Leatt, I really did not enjoy sitting in the back of an aeroplane. I used to get quite nervous about flying, and I thought one of the ways of curing being nervous about flying is learning how to fly. The aeroplanes don't just fall out the sky. Decided to do my private pilot's license at a fixed wing during this period in Leatt where there was a bit of a pause on moving production. So I eventually finished my pilot's license and then did a helicopter license. So I've been very fortunate to be able to fly helicopters and fixed wings. The aircraft needed to be repositioned from the UK to South Africa. It's a new base. There are two ways you can do that. 99.999% of people would take the wings off and put it in a container. Looking at the aeroplane, myself and my friend who accompanied me on the flight just said, let's just fly it. Let's not take the wings off. Let's do something different. Let's fly it. This is called a Composites Gamebird, and essentially it's an aerobatic aircraft that has surprisingly quite long range capabilities. It's full composite, so the aircraft is the monocoque, the wings are all constructed from carbon fiber, and with its Lycoming 580 motor on a 4-bladed hard sole prop, it's quite a weapon in the right hands for aerobatics. This is a performance aircraft, so it doesn't have flaps at all. The advantage of that is that this aircraft will roll very quickly, in excess of 400 degrees a second, which, believe me, is dramatic. Because we're setting off on a long trip, about 6,500 nautical miles, we've just done an oil change. And the engine, which generally we would fill up to about 10 quarts of oil, we've gone up to the maximum the manufacturer will allow, which is 16 quarts. So we're carrying most of our spare oil in the engine, and then we're carrying some in the cockpit with us. The pilot's in command, the person flying sits in the rear. The basic flight controls, which are the stick to roll the aircraft left and right, to pitch it up and down, the throttle, the pitch control of the propeller, and the mixture control of the engine. All these basic controls, together with the pedals and the brakes, are also found in the front of the aircraft. We're taking a yellow brick satellite communicator, and it'll drop breadcrumbs as we go so people can track our flight. An emergency locator beacon, which will be in my pocket, so there's something happens and we have to make an off-field landing, we can notify our position. The aircraft also has an emergency locator transmitter, and then here we have our radio stack, the primary radio, and this is the transponder. So this is what allows air traffic controllers to see who you are, where you are, and what speed you're doing, height, etc. We have what we call steam gauges or analog instruments. We have an airspeed indicator, which is obviously very important For flying, we have a G meter, which is electronic, and then we have an altimeter. We then have the autopilot control unit. This is an external controller for the autopilot. And then we have the main suite, which is the pilot flight display. And this is called a Garmin G3X. In flight, when the engine's running, we're looking at cylinder head temperatures and exhaust gas temperatures. And one of my jobs as we fly at different altitudes is to keep the exhaust gas temperatures at the right temperature for fuel efficiency and engine performance. We then have 3 fuel tanks on the aircraft. We have 2 wing tanks, and we have an aerobatic tank. So we can carry 308 liters of fuel, about 1,300 nautical miles if flown at altitude, or around 6 hours of endurance, which is about my bladder capacity as it is. We're looking at doing some flight planning, both in terms of weather and the legalities of flying around restricted airspaces, controlled airspaces. If you're flying to a foreign country, the workload increases. Given the Ukraine war, there's also a lot of restricted airspace. The military have co-opted a lot of the airspace. So it's a moving target in terms of flight planning. So really we're going to do one leg at a time, although we would have provisionally booked the whole route, because in Africa you've got to arrange fuel weeks in advance. But then we'll modify the route as needs be. So we've marked the blue as rainfall. The red areas, and this is animating during the day, is areas that are no-go essentially in terms of visual flight rules, which is how we're flying, and the yellow-orange areas are marginal, and we've set up those parameters. We've already had to make a change. We were going to plan to fly from Buca in the UK to Cannes in France, but the weather's not looking so good, so we're going to essentially clear customs and go into Europe at Leatt tomorrow. And essentially our route will take us from the UK to France to Italy to Crete to Egypt, and then we're essentially going to fly down the east coast of Africa all the way to Ethiopia, Kenya, Zimbabwe, and then on to South Africa. There's definitely a pioneering element to this, and there's no doubt it's an epic adventure. It's not the run-of-the-mill thing to do, and you can see why, after having done it, why it's not the run-of-the-mill thing to do. It does have an element of risk. There have been quite a few people who've done UK to South Africa or back flights. The vast majority are on aircraft that don't consume avgas. So we use aviation gasoline, which is essentially 100 octane petrol. It's leaded, and it's what these aeroplanes use. So this is an aerobatic aeroplane, and its primary purpose is aerobatics, although it's very good at being a fast cruiser for that class of aeroplane. Fully composite aeroplane, so it's made from carbon fiber and glass fiber. And the reason why we believe it's the first composite aeroplane that's flown from the UK to South Africa is that you can't go anywhere near thunderstorms. Because of the carbon weave without having a metal matrix in the wing. If you get hit by lightning, that's it. You tickets. It'll just disintegrate. It's not possible to avoid thunderstorms by flying from the UK to South Africa. The ITCZ, the Intercontinental Tropical Convergence Zone, which is the middle of Africa around the equator, very little wind, lots of thunderstorms. The weather patterns, talking to other pilots, have changed a bit. It used to be very much a case of you fly in the morning and by the afternoon all the thunderstorms are there. Now the thunderstorms start at 4 o'clock in the morning, so you really can't avoid them. And also flying an aircraft that doesn't have storm scopes or radar in order to determine whether there's an embedded Charlie Bravo, this cumulonimbus cloud that produces thunderstorms, you can't see it. So you have to look for signs and be very careful about how you fly and how you plan. So this is a life jacket. We're about to cross the English Channel, so whenever you're flying over sea, life jacket on. Left Booker, which is near High Wycombe in the UK, flew around London and had a send-off by Jackie and friends and co. Jackie actually gave the aeroplane a proper kiss with red lipstick, and when we got to Cape Town, it was still there. When we departed, we flew France and then to the tip of Italy. Airfields I've ever landed at. Italy, right on top of the mountains, little valley, restaurant at the top, absolutely magnificent. Off to Brindisi, south of Italy.
di Roma.
Aro, buongiorno. Chiamo solo per avere conferma gentilmente che abbiate acquisito il piano di volo del November 170 Golf Bravo.
November 170
Golf Bravo, da Brindisi, Lima India Bravo Romeo.
And then the next routing was going to be Greece, Egypt, and then routing down the east coast of Africa. With the wars that are happening in Gaza, with what's happening in Ukraine, just the amount of restricted airspace there is in terms of all the military bases in Europe, both American and European NATO bases, you almost cannot fly from A to B. You have to fly under, over, around, and we couldn't fly over. When we got to the south of Italy, routing towards Egypt, we were told the only flight permission we could get was flight level 19, which is 19,000 foot. Generally speaking, you can't fly over 10,000 foot without oxygen. two ways you can essentially fly: visual flight rules and instrument flight rules, which is what all commercial airliners fly. So we couldn't get VFR planning permission, and we couldn't fly under flight level 19. So that was a huge snag. Then you're thinking, can I go down the middle of Africa and then end up on the east coast? Sudan, the insurers wouldn't allow us to fly into Sudan, but we could have taken the risk and said we will be uninsured in Sudan. We could get fuel in South Sudan, but we couldn't get fuel in Eritrea or Ethiopia. So now we having to navigate around Egypt, which would have been very problematic, and no fuel in two places that we knew in at least one of those places we needed fuel. This is Menorca, trying to find a restaurant. We had a very little breakfast this morning, and so we'll chase down some liquid refreshment and some food. Very pretty here. We had some really good advice, and this is one of the pieces of advice. What is your mission in a day? Well, the mission is to get from A to B. No, that's not the mission. It's to arrive safely at your destination at the end of the day. No, that's not your mission. Your mission is to have a beer every evening. Really? So, what do you mean by have a beer every evening? You've got to make your mind up that you're going to be safely on the ground, wherever that may be, where you left, departed from, where you were intending to go to, or anywhere else in between that was safe enough to get you on the ground to have a beer that evening. And that's what we did. I don't drink beer. I drank a beer every single night, except in Mauritania, where you can't drink beer. The West Coast was a safer option. When they said there was fuel, there was a good chance there was fuel. East Coast was going to be less likely to get the fuel. So we actually really didn't have a choice. So if you look at the course, it looks like we did a big question mark. We went down from France past Cannes all the way to Brindisi, and then had to reposition and fly right across east to west across Europe. And reposition in Jerez in Spain to get on the west coast.
Morning, love. I hope you had a good night's rest. I suppose you're in the air by now, but I will check on the link. I'm going to get up now, make Gabby's granola, and then head through to 4 and 20 for breakfast with the troops, and thereafter take her to the airport and come back to the farm. I look forward to catching up later this evening.
Now, you would think that aviation oil is not that difficult to find. Well, it turns out to be exceptionally difficult to find. We knew that in Africa there is zero aviation oil for the aircraft. So we found a flying school in Spain, the southern tip of Spain, and we were donated, I think, 8 quarts of oil. So we've topped up the aeroplane and took 6 quarts with us, and that was actually also we can now do the trip, because we couldn't have even left, even if you had fuel and overflight permissions and landing permissions, without oil, you can't progress. So this is what is saving the West Coast trip, is the ability to find oil.
John, otherwise we wouldn't be going.
John, absolute star, saved our bacon. There we go.
Okay.
Oil, we can travel. Now, when you start looking for African countries where a South African passport works, the answer is not so much. You can't get you have to have a visa for Morocco, Mauritania, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, etc., etc. So this was another snag for us, is that I didn't have, we hadn't expected to go West Coast. We hadn't put in visa applications for all these towns. So what we did is we, together with the ground team, produced flight crew cards with our license details on them. Looked quite official. And we spoke to the handlers. Now, these handlers are, in some instances, very expensive without a lot of service, but in most instances are absolutely crucial. They walk you through customs. They ensure the fuel gets to where the airplane is. They help you choose a hotel. They find a taxi for you. They help you with things that just arise along the way. And by having a crew card, essentially, the handlers could allow me to be flight crew for 48 hours. Flight crew for 48 hours doesn't need a visa. We flew from Jerez to Morocco, refueled, and then landed in Nouakchott in Mauritania. It was supposed to have been a one-night stop. Turned out to be a four-night stop because of the just wall-to-wall thunderstorms between Mauritania and Burkina Faso, which was going to be our next stop. 44 degrees pretty much every day. The first really unusual refueling experience I've had, they arrived with a drum on a luggage trolley behind a Jet A1 fuel truck and a bucket. I said, but where's the pump and the pipes? No pump and the pipe. They produced a rusty funnel. We said, well, that's not going to work. And we had to bucket the fuel from the drum into a bucket, and from the bucket into the wings, into the aerobatic fuel tank. We fortunately took some paper filters with us, so we could put the paper filter inside the old funnel, and that's how we refueled the aircraft. But my word, it was hot.
How are you feeling?
Good. I love avgas. I love the smell of avgas.
We stink of avgas after bucketing it in. And what do you think you're going to drink tonight?
Water.
Ice cold water.
We were constantly flying into headwinds. What we did is we spent half a day, every day, looking at weather, doing alternative flight plans, thinking about routings. And when on day 5 we left to fly to Burkina Faso, we still got caught. Windy, which is the app that's absolutely brilliant for thunderstorms because we don't have weather radar, allowed us to predict thunderstorms and have a fairly good heading in terms of thunderstorms. So if you see a thunderstorm, you aim at it and don't change your heading, because by the time you get there, it's moved, generally speaking. Around the equator, not as much because there's very little wind. So we had a strategy around thunderstorms, but we were ending up in plus 50 knot winds. And we were at 2,500 foot all the way up to 12,000 foot, which is probably 14,000 foot density altitude. Simon started feeling really unwell with flying that high without oxygen. And we had to divert to a small airfield in Mali and essentially dive through a hole in the clouds to get onto the ground and then do this refuel with MoGas because we weren't going to make our destination in terms of range. We didn't have landing permission in Mali. The military comes straight to the aircraft. We had a rapid negotiation. Simon then went into the town to fill some jerry cans up with normal 91 octane petrol, MoGas as we call it, for cars.
This is Joseph.
Good morning.
My
name is Yusuf. I work in airport informally. I am coming in Timbuktu. My village in Timbuktu.
You're born in Timbuktu?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I am very, very Timbuktu. You welcome Timbuktu. I gave me in 40 story Timbuktu.
Brilliant.
Because my name is Yusuf. I work in this here, my friend. He come in Mali. In fact, today he come in Kai. No problem.
So what's that you putting in there?
This is my gas.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Slow.
Yeah, slow.
So we believe this is 95.
No, it's 91.
It's a 91.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to run the takeoff land on the acrobatic, and then we'll run 60% power out of the wing. We consulted with a few engineers, and we filled the wing tanks with a mix of avgas and MOGAS, and then took off on the aerobatic tank, reduced the power to 60%, and then flew on the MOGAS. And that's the part of the adventure. You know, you can't predict this kind of thing, and you can get the fuel almost right. You can think, I'm going to need 210 liters. They come in 200-liter drums, up to $6-7 a liter, which is astronomical price for fuel. If you need 210 liters, you have to open another 200-liter drum, and then you have to discard 190 liters, or somebody gets to put it in their taxi. And then landing at Bobo, which we also thought was going to be a one-day adventure, and it turned out to be a 3-night adventure with the promise of fuel. It turned out, because we'd been delayed from Mauritania to Burkina Faso, that sold our fuel. They didn't think we were coming. And there's a bartering, and they probably paid a premium for it because they hadn't planned it. So then we had to get fuel from Ouagadougou, which is only 300 kilometers north of Bobo in Burkina Faso, and we could have actually just landed there. But because of these torrential rains and thunderstorms, the whole area had seen just water everywhere. They'd washed away some of the roads, and so the convoy with our aviation fuel on got stuck. The handlers, we've learned in Africa, will tell you what you want to hear, not necessarily what's actually happening. So our handler didn't want to tell us there's no fuel. So he took us to the fuel bay for the fuel bay guy to tell us there was no fuel. So we checked out of the hotel, we got ourselves all squared away to fly, done our washing the day before, and just to have to turn around and go back again. But you know, it was part of the adventure. So with no flying again today, day number 4, we have turned to Shithead, a card game that we've both enjoy. So we've been waiting for 3-4 days for this fuel, and then the day it arrives is absolutely belting it down. So we stood under cover for an hour or two waiting, and then we eventually pulled the tarpaulin over our heads and tried to shield where the fuel was going in with a cloth, and put the nozzle in and filled the airplane up with fuel. And then we departed very early the next day for Lagos. And once again, looking at the weather in and around Nigeria and Lagos, and the trip from Bobo to Lagos, we were absolutely convinced we were going to make it. But we just felt like we had to push on and go in the right direction a little bit every day, even if we had to do a diversion and end up in a strange place. Because of the sort of safety concerns in Lagos, a lot of pilots and then the community said, you know, just if you can leave the same day, leave. Our handlers had taken our Gendex, our flight plan, our fees, gone to pay everything. We're standing in the customs queue, and here approaches our hard deck time. So I said to Simon says, we've got to stay. I said, I think we should go, but I'll make a deal with you. We're going to leave. If we can get startup permission from the tower, in other words, the tower's approved our flight plan, we go. If there's more than 10 knots of wind, we turn around and we come back, because I mean, we're not going to get there on time. And understand that we're going to fly to Principe, which is part of the Sao Tome Islands, just off the coast of Gabon, and it's in the middle of the flipping ocean. So if we get stuck in the middle of the night, and it's nightfall, and we're in the middle of the ocean, we don't have a huge amount of choice left. So he said, okay, I'll agree, but we strictly, if it's more than 10 knots of wind, we're turning around and coming back. So we managed to get startup permission 5 minutes before our hard deck time, hopped in the aeroplane, and off we went. We took off, climbed through cloud, got to 9,500 foot, and flew through the most incredible cloud formation. These towering cumulus clouds. They weren't thunderstorm clouds, they were just these towering cumulus clouds. Absolutely beautiful. We had 9 knots of headwind all the way. So we were 1 knot away from having to turn around and come back. Principe is like the forgotten world. It's like time just stood still. It's 25 by 10 kilometers in size. Half of it is a natural, just nature, jungle and all reserve. The population is about 7,000 people. And they have some quite nice resorts. The only way you can really get to the island is via aircraft, and then you fly from Libreville to Sao Tome and Sao Tome to Principe. So it's not an easy place to get to. So our tour guide GB for the day. We're going to feature on a full-length YouTube documentary when we get back. We stayed in this old Portuguese manor house. Just incredible, friendly people. And who's the CEO of this establishment is a South African. So after dinner on our first night, we got invited to his house, and we had a good old braai, post-dinner braai. I met the pilots who live on the island, who casevac medical cases and operate for the owners of this hotel. And so there was a little group of engineers and pilots, and we took the whole day out and went to the beach and sat in the rain for days. And man, did it rain. For 3 days it rained. I mean, it just absolutely bucketed down.
Hi babes, I'm sorry I can't hear you. The signal got very bad. Sending you much love. I miss you immensely and I can't wait to see you soon. Just drop me a voice note and let me know if your fuel's arrived and what the next step is.
Had a hangar which houses this aircraft they use for commercial and casevacing flights, and it costs $500 a day to put your aircraft in it. So fortunately for us, they made a plan and did us a favor, and we managed to get our airplane in this hangar whilst it absolutely bucketed down for 3 days in a row. Thank you, love. We just got a permit for Libreville. We don't have the Luanda one yet, so we're just we're planning now for a gap in the weather to hop over to Libreville, which is 140 miles, less than an hour's flight. So we're going to probably depart Principe today, but I will send a message once everything has been confirmed. Lots of love. Then when we left, we flew from Principe to Libreville. That flight, Simon and I and Mikhail looked at the weather and tried to find the right time to depart because there were just thunderstorms everywhere. I thought we should leave an hour earlier, but I'd got my way on the trip on the way in, and Simon said no, he thought it was going to be okay to leave now. So we took off, we did a nice little loop of the island, and we flew to Libreville, and now we started off 1,000 foot, 800 foot, 600 foot, 400 foot above the ocean because of just complete cloud cover. And then I had to ask Simon to steer because he sits in the front of the airplane, and I couldn't see the microbursts, and the showers were so, these patches were so many and so close to one another. So he steered us around, we went back onto autopilot again, contacted approach, which is generally speaking the first contact that you have with an airport. Told them who we were, that we had a flight plan submitted, and they said, absolutely, you're not landing here. It's low visibility IMC, so no visual flight rules. So when you get a radio call like that, what do? You just change the frequency to a different frequency and call the tower and tell them that you a little white lie and say that you're on finals, can you please land? The weather's bad, which is what we did. A little bit of weather here, but we are safe on the ground in Libreville. Amazingly, we did 18 legs in total, 17 of which were in a headwind. And we flew from low level, 2,500 foot to 12,000 foot, and with a density altitude that's probably about 14,500 foot without oxygen, trying to escape the wind, and we couldn't. We were constantly flying into headwinds. These airplanes are exceptionally sensitive in pitch and roll. They roll at 420 degrees a second. With a small move of your hand, you can pull 10G. So just the fatigue of flying it so accurately all the time. So we installed an autopilot. So that team was there. You look at these aviation pioneers, brave people doing stuff that nobody's done before, unknown, really don't understand the longevity of an engine and the performance of an engine, and pushing the envelope all the time is quite something to do.
He was a methodical and careful flyer who bristled.
So one has to have a lot of respect for these early aviation pioneers, also with very limited instruments. But I think that was also their benefit. They flew where they could see the ground, they flew when they could fly. If it wasn't looking good, they didn't fly, and they didn't have all this bureaucracy and red tape and overflight permissions and landing permissions and routing and air traffic controllers and Gendexes and customs and everything else. They could just basically hop in, fly from A to B, hopefully get there, land, spend a day or so, have their beer or two. So, very envious of those early days. So we flew from Libreville to Luanda. Quite a lot of cloud about, landed in Luanda, very big thunderstorms around. Stayed at a brother of a friend of Simon's that night. They took us out, and we got to experience a bit of normality, and actually went into a shopping centre for the first time in 2 weeks or something. When we left Luanda, the weather was terrible around Luanda again. So we took off at about 1,500 foot to 7,500 foot. We climbed through the clouds. Which once again is not ideal when you're flying visual flight rules, but we sort of developed quite a lot of confidence around our synthetic vision, terrain warning, and the autopilot functioning in turbulent clouds, and had done a lot of looking at the clouds before we left to see that there weren't any thunderstorm activity in that cloud when we left. We flew from Libreville, and the next stop was going to be Luanda. And guess what? A headwind, just for a change. Straight into a headwind, and we decided to do our diversion and land in Ondangwa, an old military base in Namibia, an old South African military base. Really nice long runway, new terminal building, very friendly people, had something to eat, and filled up with fuel, the cheapest fuel we got so far. I can't remember the price, but it was so far cheaper than anything else we'd paid for fuel. Really friendly people. And what we also noticed, that the quality of the air traffic controllers and the quality of the information just changed dramatically once we got into Namibia. Etoshapan. Man, what a bumpy flight. Hot and bumpy. 40 degrees, bumpy as all. The most turbulent flight I've ever had in my life. We started off 1,000 foot over the ground, and we ended up at about 6,000 foot over the ground. We had to ratchet ourselves so tight. There's aerobatic harnesses. We were getting thrown around. Just the most incredible mechanical turbulence, just because it's so hot and the ground is so hot and there's so many thermals. Really, very bumpy. The autopilot just wouldn't stay engaged. You had to hand fly. We decided the next day, although everybody at Stellenbosch sort of teed themselves up to be there in the afternoon, that it is so incredibly bumpy and just blooming unpleasant flying in the afternoon through Namibia, that we were going to leave really early. So we were airborne at, I think, 5 o'clock in the morning. Just the most incredible day's flight. The desert changing color, Fish River Canyon, Orange River, just so beautiful. The colors were just absolutely incredible, and no clouds. We had this, for once, we had clear visibility for almost the entire day's flying. So there was a real benefit, and we decided to do a victory barrel roll from Namibia into South Africa. I'm not sure that's been done before. Incredible day's flight. And then when we approached Longabon, it was almost overcast. Flew towards the Bottleray Hills, which I thought was the Bottleray Hills. Fortunately, it turned out that it was actually the Bottleray Hills, but we couldn't see anything. And as we got there, massive visibility over Cape Town International on the right-hand side. So we flew and we did a landing. What we've been doing is, because we've been flying 2-up, full tanks, that is over 300 litres of fuel, and all the things we needed to carry, including tools to change tyres, oil, and everything else, we had overloaded the luggage bay. And the consequence of overloading the luggage bay is that I had to approach landing faster than you would normally approach. So instead of going over the threshold at 80 knots, I was going over the threshold at 110 knots to make the landing pretty. And so we decided that the best thing to do was to offload all the luggage. So my son came to Cape Town International, and we thought we'd just be able to give him all the stuff, and he could meet us in Stellenbosch, our final destination. And so what we did is we landed the aircraft, parked it next to a Boeing, went through the usual arrivals hall at Cape Town International, went through the passport control. It's the first time my passport said you can go straight through, and we had to find the something to declare queue, not a queue that you often head for at customs. And so I said, I've got something to declare. They said, what is it? I said, it's an aeroplane parked outside. And he went, really? I said, yes. And my customs person has told me I've got to say the following. I'd like to get a retention notice from SARS, please, because the aircraft's being imported into the country. After some confusion and scratching heads, we got this retention notice. We went back out to the aircraft. So we got airborne. We were quite light on fuel, and we didn't have this 25 kilograms probably in the baggage bay. And aircraft climbed like a rocket ship and handled like a dream. And I thought, man, this is cool. Right decision before you land at a small airfield like the Stellenbosch Flying Club's runway, and you can actually touch down at a normal touchdown speed. And I asked the day before the safety officer whether we could do one flyby. So we managed to do a runway 01 flyby, and then come and land, and met by family and friends and all you lovely people, and that was our journey. 20 days in total, I believe. 18 legs, 12 flying days, 15,000 kilometers, 8,000 nautical miles. Should have been considerably less than that, but obviously we did the rerouting to position to come west instead of east. The most incredible experience. I know what you're going to ask me now, would I do it again? No, can I get back to you on that? It was an experience.
We had seen Africa from the air, met strangers who had become friends, escaped storms, dodged borders, and raced sunsets across the ocean. And this had been the last page of our logbook. But the first line of something else, a story we'd tell over campfires or in hangars over coffee, a story we would revisit in our dreams. Flying hadn't just been about the mechanics, or even the view. It had been about how it changed the way we saw the world. Africa had taught us that, in its chaos and beauty, in its bureaucracy and generosity. And in every hand that helped us, every smile that reminded us we hadn't been alone up there. From the UK to Stellenbosch, across borders, around storms, over mountains and the ocean, we had flown home, and it was beautiful.